What did you dislike to eat as a child, but now do you adore? Kinda the opposite for me. I loved my parents' cooking as a kid, but going to school in the late 90s early 2000s kids would always make fun of Mexican food and candy. They would say it looks gross, too spicy, etc. So I would tend to try and eat more American food, which can be hit or miss. Nowadays everyone loves Mexican food. My mom and dad were good cooks, but I didn't like my grandma's cooking. But my father's mother, the other grandma, could cook a turd and make it taste good. It was bizarre. We used to test her with just a bag of random groceries and she'd make a fucking gourmet meal. I guess living through the depression will do that to ya. Miss you, Grandma. Thank you, sir. I thought I was the only freak disgusted by the look of lasagna as a kid. I pretty much went through the same process. I was sleeping over a friend's house and his mom made lasagna for dinner. Would be kinda awkward to say I'm grossed out just looking at your mom's food. Had to chomp it up. Boy does that SHT smack though. Give me all the clamatas. I hated olives as a kid, maybe because we only had the canned black ones at home. Then I tried some food with real olives and it blew my mind. And capers. I'll eat a spoonful of capers as a snack. I never salted my food when I was single. My now wife is a mad woman in the kitchen and showed me how spices and salt can make things 100x better. All throughout my 20s, didn't even know you salt the water before boiling pasta. I loved black pepper, and that's the only thing I would use. I'm now 38, been with my wife for 7 years, married for 3 this coming Halloween. I cooked for her on our second date. You can guess how that went. We now have 2 shelves dedicated to spices, everything from anise to za'atar. I cooked a meal of tofu, all sorts of veggies and mixed my own spices. I even plated it beautifully. She said this could be on a menu. It's a 10/10. Your cooking is amazing. I was proud. We also watch a lot of cooking shows, so I've learned a lot from her and from shows. This is coming from a guy who eats mayonnaise with fries. I didn't own a salt shaker before I met her. I absolutely loathed bell peppers until I accidentally ordered something absolutely loaded with them at a Vietnamese restaurant with my lab mates. I tried it out of a sense of shame or obligation, and was shocked to discover that it was basically candy in vegetable form. I have no clue what my mother does to bell peppers in order to convert them into butter, inedible pellets, but I now eat them regularly. Opposite with me, I used to love bell peppers, especially this one dish where half a bell pepper is filled with seasoned, minced meat and then baked. Then I developed an allergy to all things pepper, including bell peppers and all kinds of chili, and now I loathe them. Can't wrap my head around why there has to be pepper spice in absolutely everything. From hummus to chips to cheese. Black pepper is fine, though, thank God. Frozen are acceptable if fresh is not available. They stay fairly crisp because they get flash frozen. The only vegetable that survives canning is corn. Everything else becomes mushy and gross. I've always loved Brussels sprouts. I'd never had asparagus until I was a teenager and we moved into a house that had it growing in the orchard. I was the only one that ate it. I loved asparagus as a kid, but my babysitter grew her own and we'd go pick it when it was ready and she'd fry it up in a pan with a little butter and salt until it was perfect. I would sometimes refuse to leave if she was cooking it. My mom tried her best to make it, but she would buy the canned shit or frozen and it just was not the same. I make it now how I remember, but it's never been as good as fresh picked. It took me a while to realize my parents weren't just bad cooks, they were barely cooking at almost of the time. If I think back to when I was a kid, a good 75% of our meals were pre-prepared to some degree, or else were instant box versions, or frozen versions made to heat up in the microwave that they didn't augment at all, like those microwavable pouches of veggies. And the parts that they did cook themselves were usually overdone and unseasoned. Obviously I'm sympathetic to the fact that anyone who relies on this stuff does so because they're strapped for time, which my parents certainly were. But man. I literally didn't like any home-cooked meal besides spaghetti until I was about 18 years old. I've never minded celery. That being said, I don't seek it out or buy it regularly, but if it's getting ignored on a veggie tray, I'll dip it in ranch and enjoy it. It's also a great ingredient for soups and can add juiciness and depth of flavor. Also, I've had really shitty, chewy celery in the past. I can understand hating celery based on only having bad celery. Celery is disgusting. My sister loved it as a kid and I'd swap with her for her carrots since she didn't like those much. I remember crying at snack time during kindergarten because the snack was celery and peanut butter. The asshole teacher refused to let me go play until I ate because she hated wasting food. Didn't matter that other kids offered to eat it or I said I'd at least eat the peanut butter, I had to eat it all. F celery. I never tried them when I was a kid, and only had them about a year or two ago, but I still remember it as the quintessential food that kids don't like. I especially remember watching a cartoon with, I think, toys as main characters, and one of them had pretty much a phobia of them. So, when I tried it, I also roasted them. I was like, WTF, Brussels sprouts are like the best vegetable ever. I inadvertently made my son a bougie cheese person by giving him small pieces of finely aged cheese from a fancy cheese shop in California, where we lived when he was a baby. We also started him out eating very healthy, no processed foods, no artificial ingredients, etc. That bit me when we had to move away and took a 5-day road trip and he refused fast food. He threw cheeseburgers on the floor. He gagged at a cheese quesadilla. I had to find whatever grocery stores a place had on the trip and get fresh produce and the like. But to this day, my son jumps at the chance for fine aged cheese and is very reluctant to eat sliced singles. This is the charcuterie board I ate with my son last weekend. It was a pretty good one. There is a variety of cured meats, a few cheeses, a few tiny dill pickles, some apple slices. I haven't seen apple on one before, but my son enjoyed them because I am allergic to them, and a bit of stone ground mustard and toasted baguette slices. You can be creative here. The idea is just have a variety of items to snack on that go well together. I've seen grapes on a charcuterie board because they go well with meats and cheese. They are often paired with wine, champagne, beer, or, if you don't/can't drink, a sparkling grape. Apple juice works nicely. My mom told me a story of how, when I was 2, a friend of my mom's had a get-together of some sort amongst my mom's friends and had put together a cheese plate with a few cheeses and other accoutrements. Apparently I walked over, grabbed the brick of blue cheese off the serving plate, sat down and started trying to eat the entire block of cheese like the world was ending. Unfortunately, my mom's friend found it hilarious, told my mom I had excellent taste, and made a mini cheese plate for me and sent my mom and I home with the block of blue cheese I tried demolishing. I purposely avoid cheese counters if I'm shopping when hungry. I don't know about it but I spent the first 38 years of my life thinking peanut butter was the shit of Satan. No idea what I didn't like about it. Couple years ago when I was doing an art stream, someone asked what foods I liked and what not, and peanut butter was mentioned. They challenged me to eat a spoonful of it on stream, and at the time, that was a big deal for me because I'd convinced myself it was the worst thing. I did it anyway, realized it was perfectly fine, and now, a couple years later, I have peanut butter pretty much every other day in some way or another. It's really weird how tastes can change. I was hopeful it would have happened with beer as well, but I still just hate it. Ironically, the opposite happened to me. At my church's potluck as a kid, an older lady would always bring canned beets. I would gobble them up every single potluck. Pretty sure I'd clear half of her plate alone. I wasn't too worried about being selfish because it was seldom touched anyway. But then my family stopped going to that church and I never had beets for a really long time. Tried some canned beets the other day, remembering how much I loved them, and I hated it? It was so nasty. I can't believe I ate that stuff. Absolutely nothing. We were too poor to care about what we were eating. If it was edible, it was going down the hatch. But even so, my mom never really had to put much effort into teaching us not to be picky. We never got spoiled with all the junk and sugary stuff. My favorite cereal was and still is Shreddies. We learned respect and manners very early. That's why I hate the phrase kids will be kids. Like, no, kids will be whatever they're allowed to get away with. This is difficult, as I have never really disliked much, and the few things I do dislike I still do. The only thing I can think of, where I made a complete 180, is black pudding. I would happily eat all kinds of weird fermented, brined, pickled, aged, dried, moldy, etc. foods, but for some reason blood was just a bit yucky. Once I actually tried it, I completely changed my mind. I guess dark chocolate, kinda sorta. If it isn't the main ingredient then it is usually fine, even really good, but I really disliked that when I was younger. It's always smelled and tasted like Dawn dish soap smells like to me. Even the smallest amount in a salsa that I don't even see will make the entire salsa soapy. Cucumbers taste like soapy perfume, and at 33 years old they still do. It's very chemically tasting to me, very overpowering and lingers. There's apparently some gene that causes this, but I'm the only person I know with this taste aversion, family or otherwise. Everything. I was a picky eater as a kid. I had a limited palate of maybe 10 things as a kid, which included ons or 2 Chef Boyardee cans, some fast food, and pizza. I don't know how I avoided going morbidly obese because I couldn't run a quarter-mile either. Then I got a job at a grocery store where we were encouraged to sample food so we could sell it, and I realized I was missing out on a whole world of food. Now I can eat almost anything. My dad gave me a sip of beer as a child, because I pleaded with him. I hated it. Strangely, about 10 years later, I realized I had totally misjudged that noble beverage. Also, peas, didn't like as a kid. I wouldn't say I adore them now, but I like them just fine, and eat them quite often. I think the culprit is that our taste buds become less sensitive as we age. Flavors shift from the ends of the tastiness spectrum to the middle, with time. Lobster. I live in Atlantic Canada. Big feeds of lobster in the summer are a rite of passage. I never wanted to try it because seeing my parents crack, slice, break open these little bug things for meat freaked me right out. Finally, at age 25, my uncle sat me down and showed me how to break down my own lobster. I finally tried the meat. It's friggin' amazing. Now I eat lobster all of the time, and I learned how to crack it open without any tools, which makes me feel cool. I used to hate scallions until pretty recently and now add them to food I'm preparing myself. On a semi-related note, I was in a bad mood one day when I was around 10 or so and complained because my parents ordered pizza and I wanted something else. I told them I hated pizza, and instead of admitting it was just me being a little shit, kept up the act of hating pizza for the next 8 years. I would refuse to eat it every time they ordered it and either make something else or not eat to try to guilt them. God, pretty much everything. I was a super picky eater. Top of the list, though, tomatoes and mushrooms. I tasted neither fresh tomato nor mushroom of any variety, to my knowledge. My mom did try to slip things past me, until I was 19 years old and went to Spain and couldn't avoid them. They have since become two of my favorite foods and I regret the nearly 2 decades of missing out on them. This, by the way, is a line I feed my own children constantly. You could be missing out. Ham. This is kind of a messed up reason why, but at our old house when I was like 4 or 5, there was a picture of one of my dad's previous dogs named Wiley, and one day my great imagination got the better of me during a ham supper. I kept looking at the picture of Wiley while I thought of the ham dinner Dad put in front of me. Suddenly I thought, holy shit, we're eating Wiley. My dad cooked the dog and now we're eating him. But my stupid kid mind didn't realize that Wiley died before I was born, so unless he butchered him and put him in a freezer, it couldn't be possible. That put me off of ham for a long time until I became a teenager. Now I just eat whatever food is in front of me. Feta cheese especially, and goat and sheep cheese in general. I had an episode when I was a kid, after which I refused to eat most dairy products, which lasted quite a bit into adulthood. I would slowly introduce them again, when I got over it, starting with ice cream, and continuing with other foods gradually. One of those was feta cheese, which as an adult I forced myself to try in a Greek salad, and was delighted to discover it was super tasty. Made me branch out to try goat and sheep cheeses, which I ended up liking as well. Loved them so much I pretty much always have some feta or similar cheese in my fridge to put on an impromptu salad. I still cannot force myself to drink milk or eat cream, and especially curd cheese. The smell of curd cheese alone makes me gag, to a point I sometimes have to leave the room if someone's eating it. Mushrooms. I put that shit in everything I eat now. Spaghetti, ramen, omelets, BLT sandwiches, or I would straight up just put them on a pan, grill them until juice develops in the middle of the mushroom and eat it whole. I wish the commissary at my base sold enoki mushrooms. Those are my favorite, but I can't seem to find them anywhere and there are no Asian markets around me. Also tomatoes. I hated them when I was younger, but I can tolerate them now. I think it was the texture of the tomatoes I hated, and it really didn't taste like anything but grass to me when I was younger. My mom grew up eating vegetables from the farm, and when I was a child she thought that anything processed was more sophisticated. My childhood consisted of hot dogs, bologna, grilled cheeses and hamburgers. The more processed the food the better. It always looked like we were having a party at checkout.